Hello, welcome to Psychopath in Your Life. I'm your host, Dianne Emerson. This will be episode number 5. I've gotten some really interesting emails this week, and I'd like to address one of them first because it has to do with the, we're just going to go another round on the definitions because there's so many terms out there, it can become kind of hard to track them all. There's somebody in particular that wrote to me, and they have a young child who's in the early teenage years who's a budding psychopath. And part of the confusion for them is, well, there's a million issues, but the main issue is that they keep hearing all these different diagnostic things. They have what appears to be a pretty with it doctor who does consider the child a psychopath. So if you ever think it's hard being an adult dealing with a psychopath, imagine being a parent with a psychopathic child. Well, these people were able to get this child into a care facility because there's a lot of danger to them in their home. So let me read something here. I try not to, be too scripted, but let's clear up some of this stuff. There's this thing called the DSM, and the reason you'll hear DSMV is the V part is the 5th edition, okay? The DSM stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM. It's a handbook used by healthcare professionals in the United States and much of the world as the authoritative guide to the diagnosis of mental disorders. DSM contains descriptions, symptoms, and other criteria for diagnosing mental disorders. Well, the group we're talking about, psychopaths, they fall into the personality disorder section of the DSM. And let's start off by age, how things start to evolve with diagnostic things for children as they move into adulthood. There's one diagnosis, I forget the name of it, but you'll hear once a psychiatrist starts to get the hint that there might be a personality disorder involved, you might hear the word conduct disorder. A lot of times that's an initial diagnosis for a child. And it's not uncommon for children and teens to have behavior-related problems at some point during their development. Well, I think all of us can agree with that. I mean, I don't know any people I know who are model teens. Okay, so however, the behavior is considered to be a conduct disorder when it is long-lasting and when it violates the rights of others, goes against accepted norms of behavior, and disrupts the child's or family's everyday life. Okay, so then, along with conduct disorder, you'll also hear the term RAD. And I'll read you the definition by the Mayo Clinic on that. RAD means Reactive Attachment Disorder. They consider it rare but a serious condition when a child or young child doesn't establish healthy attachment with parents or caregivers. Reactive attachment disorder may develop if the child's basic needs for comfort, affection, and nurturing aren't met and loving, caring, stable attachments with others are not established. With treatment, this is where it gets a little bit dicey because they really don't know what the treatment means. They feel like children with RAD may develop more stable and healthy relationships with caregivers and others. Treatments for RAD include positive child and caregiver interactions, a stable nurturing environment, psychological counseling, and parent or caregiver education. Okay. A lot of times RAD gets the blame for RAD. I used to read this RAD form for a long time when forms were more active, and it tended to be a lot of people in that form were caregivers, grandparents, foster parents, and they tended to be of the thought that they resisted the thought that it could be psychopathic behaviors, and they were of the belief that the parents had to have done something wrong, that the parents were totally to blame, and that if you hug these kids more, everything would get better. Okay? And so continue on with this Mayo Clinic definition. Most children are naturally resilient, and even those who've been neglected, lived in orphanages, or had multiple caregivers can develop healthy relationships. It's not clear why some babies and children develop RAD and others don't. Various theories about reactive attachment disorder and its causes exist, and more research is needed. Yeah, boy, that's for sure. Anyway, so now we start to move up into the adults, and here's where we start to split the differences. And you'll start to notice a pattern here. What we're all talking about, even in the conduct disorder, the RAD, and now when we get into the ASPD, and the same thing that I was talking about earlier, psychopaths and sociopaths, is the main criteria is they all lack a conscience, okay? So we got all these big fancy words, but you'll see the patterns going through how they are defining these things. Okay, so now we're a little older, about 18, and finally they feel comfortable giving an official diagnosis. And the American Psychiatric Association and the DSM prefer the term ASPD. Now, Dr. Robert Hare has created the analysis for psychopathic behaviors, so I tend to go by what his wording is, because him and researchers in that field have clearly stated the word is psychopath. So that's why I tend to use the word, because they're the leading experts in the world. Like Dr. Gakono is the world's leading expert, and if you need a diagnosis, he's your guy. Okay, so antisocial personality disorder, sometimes called sociopath. You see, here we start to enter this cloud again, okay, is a mental condition. You know, if I were writing this, I'd say it's a personality disorder, okay? It says, which a person consistently shows no regard for right or wrong, here again to conscience, and ignores the rights and feelings of others. People with antisocial personality disorder tend to antagonize, manipulate, or treat others harshly or with callous indifference. They show no guilt or remorse for their behavior. Those with ASPD may begin to show symptoms in childhood, but the diagnosis cannot be established until early adulthood. So if you'd like further information, you can go to Dr. Hare's site, and it's Hare, HARE.org, and you'll see there they do have a diagnostic tool, and it's called the youth version, and it's available for ages from 12 to 18. So you see, we've got a long ways to go. What gets to me is, where do these people think that the adults came from? I mean, you don't just, your conscience forms between 3 and 5 years old. And how much these people are going to act out behaviorally depends on what kind of supervision they're getting. So it doesn't really add up. I mean, they don't just pop up out of the blue as adults. I mean, there's behaviors all along. And so the parents that nurture them are the ones who are going to go on to lead more successful, probably carefree kind of lives. Probably, I would say, the destruction rate of a well-socialized, let's say humanized psychopath, the destruction rate to people on the outside is probably greater than any serial killer as far as the number of lives it can wreck. Now, I'm not making gross statements, but let's say this. Let's say if you were to believe that the people maybe in charge of banking who took down the entire economy, and for that were rewarded with billions of dollars and free money back. Now, they would have to you start to have to kind of wonder about whether they have a conscience or not. So we tend to kind of reward excessive greed and not pay attention to what a conscience is. So anyway, so if you have any questions about this stuff, this show is really, it's only for you. And it's about building our relationship so that you will feel comfortable asking me your questions. And I'll talk in the end about how to get a hold of me. I've given you a private option and a direct email option. But I'd like to address one thing. We all can improve. And I was reading this review of my book over on Amazon, and I must say that, who wants to get a 2-star review, right? You spent a lot of time writing a book, you did something new that no one's done, and I think that sometimes my personality gets mistaken by people, because on the surface I can appear to be very calm, cool, collected, but that doesn't mean that I don't mean that in a negative sense. For example, this comment that said, I don't know, I'm going to paraphrase it here. It was like something about I was chumming around with these psychopaths that I interviewed. And, well, to that I would say I live by the theory that you can't antagonize and persuade at the same time. So naturally, if I wanted the conversation to continue to extract information, then I would have to be engaging with them. I wasn't chumming around with them. There was even a part that I had to take a break for a couple of days. So if I were to have reacted in any way along the way with comments like, that's disgusting, or you're evil, any of those thoughts that I was clearly having, then it would steer the conversation in a direction that was not getting to the truth of how they operated. So naturally, the only comments I would make back to these psychopaths was, well, that's interesting. Tell me more about this. Because I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what their process was. You know, what's the list they use for gaslighting and all of that. And another comment was that I gave them a platform to play the victim or be the victim or whatever it was. Well, I guess maybe I didn't make it clear in the book. I would never have communication with psychopaths in the future. It clearly wasn't something I was looking to for a long term. I figured I better get all the information I could for the book because that would be it. But anyway, so it was kind of disheartening because I thought, well, maybe I wasn't very clear. And the part about me letting them be a victim, I guess kind of missed part of the point. A really great psychopath plays the victim while they're victimizing others. And they have a real solid plan for how they operate. They have it down to a T. They have all these ways to deflect you. I mean, playing a victim is exactly how they're going to catch their prey. And as we've spoken before, their prey are kind and caring people. So here's the thing. We need to explore this subject, and it's going to be guided by your questions to me. I don't know where you want to go with it. I did get a really nice email from a lady who I'll read in the next segment. So, you know, I don't tend to be. If you came to me and said, you know, we hadn't seen each other in a long time and you were talking about your relationship and what did I think, I'm always cautious to say something until you say what do I think. But we're in a different kind of environment now. So, because you have the ability to just tune it out if you don't want to hear it. But I don't tend to be the hair on fire kind of reactive person. So I'm not going to move into high mode. For example, I may have said in the past, leaving a relationship with a psychopath can be dangerous. Well, I will clearly get into that along the way. Because, for example, if I were to start to horrify you with how dangerous it could be, I mean, it has a high possibility for that. People with psychopaths in their lives suffer from PTSD, and I can say pretty much across the board. So when you have PTSD, your skill sets are not going to be exactly as sharp as they normally are. So you're going to suffer from a lot of anxiety, a lot of paranoia. You know, you've had a lot of gaslighting going on. Your ability to hear things isn't there. So let's say you start to tell me about this relationship, and I tell you what I'm really thinking at the time, which is what I used to think when people would write these stories. I would think, run, get out of there. But that's really not the right response, because let's say I tell you to run. Well, maybe you might run too fast, and it doesn't end well for you. My best advice would be to go to a women's abuse shelter and ask for some tips about how to get out safely. And if I just jump to a solution, which would be run, then I'm not allowing you to tell me how you feel. And let's say I tell you to run, and then you go home And these people have an uncanny ability of how to draw you back in if they start to see you start to wander away. So you go home and things kind of are starting to return to the honeymoon phase. They show up with some flowers or take you out to a nice dinner. So you start to think, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this person isn't that bad. So then things are going to revert back to bad again. I mean, that's pretty much a given. So what have I done by yelling run? Well, what I've done is now there's a lot of stigma and shame attached. So are you going to come and talk to me after my response was hair on fire and get out of the situation? Well, probably not, because you're going to feel like, sheepish about saying, well, I went back. But you know what? This will be the letter I'll read you tomorrow. People going back is very common. It's very, very common. There's no shame in that game, okay? And people being involved in more than one relationship with a psychopath is also very common. So we'll discuss more of that in our next episode. And I've given you 2 ways to contact me. If you go to my website, which is psychopathinyourlife.com, same name as the show, you'll find a contact page there. And you can either email me directly, or there's a box there. And with the box, we finally got the electronics figured out so that you don't have to enter your email address. And that technically we finally got that worked out. But so I'm not in the email collecting business. I have no aspirations to build this, monstrous list and start soliciting you for all kinds of stuff. So if you have a question that you want a quick answer, obviously I don't have time to get involved. But if you have a quick question like, hey, I want to get a diagnosis, I'm going through a divorce, who do you recommend? Okay, then send me your email address and I'll answer you. But I won't answer you until you ask me to answer you, because I don't know what situation you're in. I don't know if you're still living with this person. I don't know if you're still working for this person. So basically, I regard everything as confidential, and I'm the only person who reads my own emails. I don't have a staff. I mean, unless you call George over here, the cat in the corner. Or you can email me directly at Dianne, and it's Dianne at Dianne Emerson, DianneEmerson.com. And let me tell you one other thing. The website will have the other email address. Oh, we finally have our scheduling sorted out. We will be doing our shows every Tuesday, and we're doing them on iTunes, Google Play, Facebook, YouTube, and the website. So you have 5 places to get in touch. And I'd love to hear from you. It's not, the show's not about me, it's about you. So thanks for hearing through some of my personality things. I just want you to get to know me a little bit better, because I care. I really care. I know that as a victim, many years ago, I lost everything to a corporate psychopath, and it was the kind of thing that took literally years to overcome, and it was very, very misunderstood, because they're that good at taking a situation and turning people who've known you for 20 years into believing these things of this person that just entered the scene. So I have a kind of an idea of what you're going through. We're all different. Pain is pain no matter what it is. So anyway, I'd love to hear from you, and be safe out there, and visit the website, and I will look forward to chatting with you next Tuesday. Thank you very much. Goodbye.